Okay, welcome to Project Manage This, and we're going to show you, or I'm going to show you, how to undertake a risk assessment. So your boss has asked you, can you do a risk assessment? And you're thinking, oh, what is that? So you've Googled it, you've looked it up. This video is a real simple walkthrough, and actually it shows you the tools you need. So before you start shouting for help and start bringing people in, which is usually what people start doing, is they start saying, right, let's get everyone involved in assessing the risks. First thing you need to do is understand the context, the risk context. What does that mean? What are you trying to risk assess? Okay, so within your project, if you are trying to risk assess the delivery of, let's say, an engineering change, so you're trying to, I don't know, build a building, or you are trying to put a new IT tool in, you need to understand that. So let's come up with an example. Let's say you work for Elon Musk, and he wants to put some lovely phallic rocket up in the sky to go to Mars. So what you're going to do is you're going to risk assess that project achieving that goal. But there might be a few things that you need to consider. So you've got to risk assess against the time. So what could delay the project? You want to risk assess against the cost. So what might, cause you to overspend. The last one is, what do you want to risk assess against the quality? Two cogs, not a really good description of quality, but you get the point. So now you're going to write down, you're risk assessing that the rocket won't land at £1 billion budget on Mars by the end of this year. Now notice that is a very prescriptive, smart objective. Elon's rocket won't safely land on Mars within a budget by the end of this year. So you've got quality, you've got time, and you've got cost. Okay, and that's quite important that you think of those three things if you can. Okay, so first things first, you create the risk matrix. What the devil does that mean? So you're agreeing the scoring for the risks. Okay, so here we go into my Excel sheet. Everyone loves Excel, don't they? So first of all, you look at the risk matrix. So basically what you want to be doing is look at a impact rating. So as you may recall, you've got two sides of the coin when it comes to risk. You've got the probability something happens and the impact if that thing does happen. So in this example, and this can be downloaded on the link below, this Excel file, so you can use this for your own purposes. It's only 49p, so please click on the link on the bottom. But basically you'll see I've set an impact rating up of just very high down to very low. In other words, if this happens, it's a very high impact to the outcome of your project. So there's kind of three things that kind of usually you'll assess the impact against is time, cost, and then quality. So if we first of all stick with time, for this project for Elon's rocket, we may decree that anything that risks delaying the project by over 8 weeks is going to have a very high impact, whereas anything under 1 week has a very low impact. And then cost, you can either put this into two categories. So although they're both called cost overspend, you might do it as an actual number. So if you've got over £200 million of spend, because of that budget being realised, over £200 million of your budget, or it could be that it's over 25% of your program budget. Okay, and the reason sometimes it's good to put it in a percentage rather than in a kind of actual figure is sometimes if your budget you've been given is, let's say, £100, being 25% over is quite significant. Whereas if your budget is £100 million, then being 25% over, as you can see, 25 million, sorry. So you might want to put it as an actual figure. So it's quite important to think of that. The other thing is quality. So in the example of Elon's rocket, a very high impact would be if it explodes on launch or it unintentionally hits Earth. But yeah, you could say that's very high. Going down to it will explode in space with no fragments, it will miss Mars or the unintended crash land on Mars. It will land on an unintended location of Mars, but it can still carry its mission, or it has no impact. So, those are normally the three. There are other headers as well, and this is where this criteria, this assessment, not only in terms of, the impact rating against quality, cost, and time, you may want to have a chat to, key stakeholders, your customers, and have actually them come up with what is the assessment of what would be a time delay. So if you were delivering a project, let's say like delivering a new build for the Olympics, any time delay is going to be absolutely critical. Whereas if you're delivering a project that's, in this case, something that's quite high profile, then something to do with quality Could be quite key, but there might be other attributes, and here's some example. Reputation. So what's the customer satisfaction? What's the impact going to be if this risk is realised? Could you have no recovery possible from customer trust? So although it may not cost you a lot, may not delay you by much, and it may not have a big quality impact, you may damage that trust with your customer, which is irrecoverable, and therefore may deem that as a high risk. The other side of the coin, as I said, is probability. So probability is a hard one to assess, and this one actually you've got to kind of look at yourself. It's kind of, is there an over 50% chance? I mean, what does over 50% mean? So if you walk down a road, and what's the chance that you will cross the road and get hit by a bus? It depends. So that's a bad example. God, it's a bit grim, aren't I? So what's the probability of winning the lottery? Well, actually, you can look at that one. So anyway, I'm not making a very good point. The probability one is a bit harder, but with the impact, if I hide the probability a little bit, what you're doing is you're making the assessment that anything that comes into these categories will deem that impact is very high, and this takes out all the emotion as well. So if you're looking at a risk, what would happen if that risk was realised? So let's come up with an example. Let's say you're working on this Elon's rocket. All of a sudden, a guy comes up to you and says, actually, the design of the engine is poor. We may not have enough thrust. It may not get off the launch pad, and it's going to cost us, let's say, 100 million to resolve. So, and it's going to delay us by 2 weeks. Okay, so let's have a look at that. So it's going to delay us by 2 weeks. It's going to be, how much did I say, 100 million? So it's going to be over 20 million. It's not going to be over 200. Let's just say, for argument's sake, that's 10 to 20% of the budget. It won't explode or unintentionally hit Earth. It won't explode in space. It will miss Mars or unintentionally crash land or land on unintentionally. So it's none of those, actually. Because it's just not going to leave the launch pad. Okay, so let's just say it has none of them, for argument's sake. But customer trust has been damaged, recovery impossible. Now, because that one there, that is the top impact, that means your assessment is impact very high. Now, if that wasn't the case, let's just say that minimal damage to stakeholder trust could be easily recoverable. Then, because the highest scoring is on cost overspend, the impact rating would be high. So this is where, even though you might have a risk which has a huge financial impact, but all the rest of it is down at very low, that is your driving factor, and you want to reference that in the risk later on. Okay. Key thing before we move on from here is agree this with your stakeholders. Get this defined first of all, in this really simple format, because it will make life so much easier later when you can assess the risks. And also, if I take the example of the rocket, not being able to have enough thrust to leave the platform, if the biggest issue is customer trust damaged, recovery impossible, because it's touch or go whether actually the calculations have been are correct. If that's the very high impact, then you may want to have a chat with your customer. You may want to look at making them aware of the issue, so that they're aware that it is touch or go. That's a really bad example as well, but you get the point. Okay, so finally now we're looking at the actual risk. So you've agreed your risk matrix with your stakeholders, and the word you want is Pestel. So this is a really good acronym to try and consider what are the risks that you are capturing. So you could invite people in and start saying, right, throw me your risks. What are the risks for us delivering this £1 billion project, this rocket going to Mars? The Pestel, first one, Pete, is political. So what are the political drivers that could impact the project? Government funding, bodies, whatever it may be. Next one is economic or economy. So again, cost, financing, how are you going to fund it, what risks are around spend. Next one is social. So education, media. Is culture, is social media going to impact the project? Technology is the next one for the Pestel. So, is there going to be some archaic system or new technology that you require to use? Legal. So, is there commercial, contractual issues that could potentially risk you undertaking the project or completing it as required. Last one, but by no means least, is environmental. And this is all about not just environmental in terms of, you know, looking after the planet, but also sustainability, ethical, and the weather maybe. So all of that, now you can start looking at the risks. So let's see how you capture them. Excel sheet is available if you want to have this, which is a really simple risk matrix, and it's 49p. There is a more detailed risk matrix that you can download, all in Excel, really easy to use, can be used and can be completely customizable, so you can change all of this. So there's a sales pitch and the links you can see. So now you need to start looking at the risks. So before I click on the risk list tab, you've got one of two options here. You can either think, I want to capture the risk on my own in isolation, and the reason I wanted to show you the Pestel is because you could go through those. So you can think, right, for the risk around delivering the rocket safely to Mars within the budget, what politically could impact that? What's the economy, you know, so how are we going to afford that and cost it? Social, are there any kind of issues that there might be in terms of, I don't know, media or the culture at the time? Are people going to be supportive of it? Technology, legal environments. You may want to do that in isolation, or you may want to just bring key stakeholders into the meeting and start opening up the question and actually having a risk session which you facilitate, or ideally someone outside of the project facilitates, because then they can start questioning, you know, aspects of the project which maybe people haven't thought of because they're inside the project. I've always gone for the bring people in stakeholders, but that's up to you. So now you're sitting in a session. So let's say you've done it, you know, with a team or in isolation. So this is the risk, the means of capturing all the risks. Okay, I've put two in here. Now all risks will be given their individual ID, when they were created, and maybe a little bit of a title. So let's say rocket boosters. This just helps. Oh, if I could spell rocket. So if you want to start looking at all of the risks around rocket boosters, all risks are written as an if then. If this happens, then this happens. It's really critical, you know, in my experience, to have that, because what can happen is you can have someone writing out all of this kind of long spiel about we have concerns over X, Y, and Z. What's it going to lead to? And the reason that if and then is important is, let's just say that you've got two rocket boosters to lift the rocket off into space, onto Mars. You can tell I'm not a rocket engineer, but anyway. So if the two rocket boosters are not sufficient to lift it out of orbit, in other words, lift it away from Earth, crash back to Earth. So that effect, you can already see, is a significant one. Okay, or the two rocket boosters are not sufficient to get the rocket out of orbit, it never leaves the platform. Redesign with retrofitting. So you can see there's two different massive differences in the impact, but it's the same cause. Okay, you could get into detail as to, you know, how much thrust do the rocket boosters need, etc., etc., but the principle, the same cause, is leading to two different effects. Okay, so let's just say now you start capturing all of these risks. Okay, and this is of the Pestel one. This is a technology risk. This is the technology of the rocket boosters not being sufficient. Crash back to Earth. Now, if I skip over the big bit here, is the probability impact. Okay, so let me just, I'll tell you what, if I lock these panes for you, here we go. These are the two, probability and impact. Okay, so you've done your risk matrix. First of all, you capture all of your risks. Don't score them. Just capture your risks. Okay, just keep listing them. Then, when you've done that first part of listing all the risks, then you look at the probability impact. The reason you do that is because as you go through the list, you'll very quickly find that you're comparing, you know, likely risks against one another. So in this case, for example, let's just say you're sitting with the engineering team. They say that the probability of this happening is very high, you know, that it's not going to be successful. Okay, so there you go. Already it's started to score the ranking. Impact. What's the impact of it crash landing back into Earth? Well, it's going to explode or unintentionally hit Earth. There you go. There's a very high impact straight away. So there's no doubting that. No doubting that is what's going to be the cause. So there you go. Very high. There you go. Flashing red at you. You should be worried about that risk and you need to do something about it. If it doesn't leave the platform, and it leading to a redesign, then you could say, oh, Miss Mars, mediocre failure, let's just say, right? So it's an unintended mediocre failure. Let's just say for argument's sake. Yeah. So we'll put that as a medium. There you go. Gives it a nice orangey amber kind of colour. Yeah. So straight away you can see the principle of this. You've captured all your risks. You start scoring them. And the other thing that I'd recommend doing is you put a risk status against them. So put all of your risks as unapproved when you capture them. Okay. And what you're then doing is when you go back over them, you're asking a real simple question: is this a valid risk? If it is, we approve it. If it's not a risk, you can close it. If it's something that you just want to keep an eye on and you're not going to do anything with it, you can watch it or you can delete it. Now you may think, why is there a deleted button? Why don't you just remove it? It's always useful to capture your risks, even if as a project team you agree that that should be deleted. So let's capture one. So let's say if the painting of the rocket causes customer dissatisfaction, then loss of reputation. Now, okay, let's just say, oh, I can't spell, but don't worry, you get the point. Let's say you took and you go, do you know what, that's not a valid risk, remove it. Now, it could be that that could happen, so don't remove it, just put it as deleted, and just put a bit of a comment in there, say agreed through meeting X, not valid. So that means you've assessed it. You've deleted it. So you just don't feel it's an agreed risk. Closed is slightly different. Closed means you've actually looked into it. So you might go start looking with the customer and saying, listen, this is how we're going to paint the rocket. What do you think? Do you like the look of it? Looks nice, doesn't it? We put a stripy star on it. Oh, stripy star. God blimey. Anyway, yeah, we love that. It's great. Thanks very much. Close it, because it's not a risk anymore. Okay, so that's the difference. Approved means it is a genuine risk, and once it's approved, really, it just stays on there. Okay. Risk owner is the person who is going to manage that risk, who is going to mitigate it. Okay, you know, this could be Bob, poor old Bob. Okay, who's the originator? Who came up with the risk? John. And that's important, because if Bob has any questions on the risk, he may want to go back to the originator, in other words John, and say, hold on a minute, where did this risk come from? Background, you know, is there any analysis completed, etc., etc. This is your probability impact. What's your treatment plan? Okay, so your treatment plan might be, I mean, I've put one in here: parachute to return safely to Earth, or put another booster on a rocket. So those are potentially the options. Now it might get very detailed, but if you put a parachute on it and it doesn't lift it out of orbit, then it will just land safely back onto Earth somewhere, unless it's in the middle of a populated area. Or you just put another booster on the rocket. This one might be, the treatment plan is you just accept the risk. You say, do you know what, that's fine. If it doesn't lift off the platform, we'll just go away and we'll redesign it. Who's going to be the treatment plan owner? Now this is different from the risk owner. Risk owner might be someone who actually, if the risk is realised, he's going to be the one who's, you know, it's allocated to. So he's going to be standing up in front of all the press to try and answer it. The treatment plan a treatment plan owner is the individual who's managing the treatment on behalf of the risk owner. So it might be, so for example, if you're putting another booster on the rocket, it might be the engineering lead, okay, who's now managing that risk, treating it. Treatment strategy, this is an interesting one. So you've got 5 options. You can either mitigate it, which means that you're reducing the probability or the impact. Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll take these freezing panes off so you can see it. Okay, there you go. Reject it. The treatment owner is just going to reject it. Transfer it. Now transfer is an interesting one. Transfer basically means that you are going to hand that risk over to someone else. So transfer sometimes is like an insurance policy. You've accepted that the risk could be realised, a bit like your car insurance, the risk of having a crash and having a big payout. You've resolved that risk by transferring that risk onto an insurance company. You've got insurance. Again, there's an insure option, so you've actually insured against that, so you're paying someone else, or you transfer it to somebody else. So let's say in this example there is a risk register for the rockets themselves being capable of thrust, and this is the risk against the top level overall, big deliverables. You may transfer the risk onto that register and say, actually, you're looking after the rocket, you do it. Accept means we've accepted the risk. So this one here means that actually we're not going to do anything. It's going to stay as that. We accept that if it happens, it happens. We accept the consequences of it if it's realised. Target resolution date, the date, and this one here, the work, effort, complete and mitigation realised, this is just a yes or no. Okay? And then last updated on, last updated by. Now, all of that seems quite simple, but what you're doing is in that first meeting, you're sitting with the key stakeholders, capturing all of the risks, scoring them, and then usually it goes through 3 cycles. So the first cycle is capture the risks, just list them. Second one is rank them, okay, start scoring them. Third one, start understanding the treatment plan, what you're going to do about it. Okay, once you've got to that stage, you want to go round that loop again. So you want to go back and review the risks. You want to be very careful that you're not just completely blinkered, if that's the right word, so you're not considering what new risks are potentially being realised. Well, it's why it's good to go back to the Pestel approach to just reaffirm has anything changed. And it's especially important to do risk analysis or assessment if anything does change. But once you've gone round this loop a couple of times, then you can start seeing actually the mitigation and hopefully the risks dropping. Okay, and when your boss, going back right to the beginning, has said, can you do a risk assessment, even if they don't know what that means, this is what it is. This is the risk assessment. So you can then report from here to say you have X amount of very high risks. This is the mitigation you're doing. These are the key risks. That is it. That's risk management. Okay, real short kind of assessment. Hopefully this has helped. Please leave comments at the bottom so I can help. This risk matrix, this basic risk matrix, is only 49p. So even if you download it, have a go at it. Please, come back with any questions. I will be putting up a more detailed risk register which gives you more analysis coming out of this, so when you enter the information it will tell you kind of how many risks you've got at a certain level, and you can start filtering the risks, all those kind of things. But for risk management 101, this is a good start. I really hope that's helped. Please like, please subscribe. As I said, please leave comments at the bottom, and thanks for watching.